No real surprise here. The Muslim Brotherhood has really rejected the peace treaty with Israel, and it'll put it to a referendum, they say. Now, what they're doing that for is they assume that the vote will be no. We don't want a peace treaty with Israel. Emmanuel Navon is an Israeli academic and author currently running for Likud's primaries at the next Knesset election. He joins us by the wonderful world of Skype from Jerusalem. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, you didn't have to be an expert on the region to know that the Muslim Brotherhood, if they had their way, would have got rid of the peace treaty. They say they'll put it to a referendum. Is that likely to happen?
Well, if they submit the treaty to a referendum, it is very likely that a majority of the Egyptians will reject the peace treaty with Israel for a simple reason, which is that in 1979, when the late Egyptian president Anwar al-Sadat decided to sign a peace treaty with Israel, he did it against the will of his own people. Sadat was a dictator, and he signed this peace treaty because he needed the money from the U.S. government, and he knew that the only way for him to recover the Sinai Peninsula was to sign a peace treaty with Israel. But this was not approved, of course, by the Egyptian people, Egypt not being a democracy. Now, for the past 30 years, despite a formal peace agreement between Israel and Egypt, there has been no peace on the ground. The government-controlled media has been extremely anti-Israeli and even anti-Semitic. And so on the one hand, Mubarak, who succeeded Anwar al-Sadat, kept the peace treaty with Israel to receive money from the United States, but on the other hand, he continued to incite against Israel within his own country.
Right. Now, if it does go to a referendum, I think I agree with you, it's overwhelmingly likely the Egyptian people will say no to the peace treaty. Obviously, Egypt has not developed a warm relationship with Israel. However, it hasn't encouraged hostilities from Gaza. It has put soldiers on the ground in Sinai. Suddenly, you'd have a border that would have to be heavily armed. You'd have to have soldiers there all the time. I'm not saying they would invade. The absence of peace doesn't mean war, but it would change the situation for Israel, surely.
Well, definitely. We have to understand today that Egypt will not go to war against Israel for a simple reason. Egypt is a bankrupt economy, and it can simply not afford to fight a war with Israel, a war that it will lose anyways because of Israel's military superiority. On the other hand, the Sinai Peninsula, which under the peace agreement was demilitarized, is going to become today a completely kind of different kind of arena with terrorist organizations and weapons. So Israel's southern border is going to be much more dangerous and sensitive, and Israel will have to invest more efforts and more energy in order to preserve its southern border. There will be no war. However, definitely Israel will have to invest more efforts to keep its border with Egypt safe.
Gaza can easily be armed by an unfriendly Egypt. Surely that's likely to happen. That will affect you as well.
Well, definitely. It has already happened in the past 2 years, even when Mubarak was still in power. Mubarak did very little to prevent the militarization of the Gaza Strip. Despite the military blockade on Gaza, there's been much weapons smuggling via tunnels in between Gaza and Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. So yes, Gaza already for the past 2 years has turned into a terrorist base with the presence even of Al-Qaeda. And with the new government in Egypt, which is it's going to be an Islamist government with the victory of the Islamist parties, definitely Gaza, which today is run by the radical terrorist organization Hamas, will turn, unfortunately, into a terrorist base.
I don't know if people appreciate this, but Eilat, which is a developing very quickly town on your southern point, a port, holiday resort, just, 100 yards away from the Egyptian border. Now, I don't suppose the Egyptian army will be right at that border, but my golly, that's incredibly close to a lot of Israeli people.
That is true, and it's true of the rest of the country as well. Let me remind you that the city of Tel Aviv is only about 15 miles from the Green Line, and that Israel at large is a Western type of country, a very successful and wealthy country in a region which is extremely backward. So it's true not only of the contrast between Eilat and the Sinai Peninsula, it's also true of Israel, a first world economy, a democracy, in a region of backward economies and dictatorships, military dictatorships, which are slowly turning into Islamic regimes.
The Arab Spring, some of us predicted there could be some major problems. I think they are now, sadly, tragically, coming to fruition. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.